Hello and welcome. Let's see if I can get this out without going into another coughing fit. I'm still sort of recovering. The mind is willing, but the body isn't at the moment. So I'm just listening to the body, taking things easy. What I wanted to talk about in this video is the subject of Oak Island. So where is Oak Island, first of all? It is a small island off the coast of Nova Scotia, and it is part of Canada. Over the centuries, there's been all sorts of rumours about this particular island and having buried treasure. So skipping forward to, I suppose, about the early 1950s, you have two brothers, the older one, Rick, I think it's pronounced Legida, and his younger brother Marty, who have effectively, as I understand it, have basically bought the island. I've jokingly said I would love to have had a job with the Canadian Post Office if the pension can provide all that, all the financial resources to undertake such an investigation, be it a treasure hunt or just curiosity to put to bed and clear up the mystery about Oak Island. Now, I believe it was about 2012 that I think it's the History Channel got involved, so there's that perspective. So basically, whenever you watch an episode, I think it's something like 6 seasons it's got to now, you've got an hour's slot, so you can discount 20 minutes for adverts. So you're left with about a 40-minute program. So the start of each episode will give you a recap of the last episode or the last series and the backstory interspersed all the way through, no matter what episode you watch. Then you've got a little bit of tantalizing information, then you go to adverts, and then you have a recap after the adverts of what was shown on the first part, and so on. So it becomes very repetitive, and it's something you could probably boil down to about 10 minutes. But it is said in such a way that is very alluring to keep you watching if you are curious about that sort of thing. So, as I understand it, it's been for the last 2 centuries, there has been a succession of attempts. There's also a prophecy that 7 people will die before whatever is discovered is revealed. There's been 6 deaths over the years where people have tried these excavations to find what are described as smugglers' tunnels or such like. Add to the intrigue, now I just did a very quick Google search to look for the Oak Island flag, but you get the current administrative flag. But I'm pretty certain, this is all from memory, I have absolutely no notes in front of me, that the Oak Island flag is an exact mirror of the Knights Templar flag, i.e. a white background with a red cross, and in the one corner you have a sort of ornate styled sort of cross, shall we say. So the Knights Templar flag is mirrored with the Oak Island flag, and certainly in the TV series you have continuous stories of association of Knights Templar, various pirates and stolen treasure, and that's all been buried there. I seem to remember at one time it's supposed to contain, buried in one of under this island, an enormous amount of worth and the Ark of the Covenant, and thrown in for good measure a couple of lost Shakespeare plays. How much of that has been embellished to keep the story going, who knows? I'm leaving it to you to make your mind up on things. This is one of these videos I wish I had the technology to show you pictures and things, but you'll have to suffice with me just talking about it. But that has the advantage that you can just listen, because there's nothing really visual to see on this video. So the sort of backstory, I believe it was around 1820, three young lads found the original, or one of the tunnels. That was the first sort of exploration, and the story basically goes with each successive treasure hunter who has tried to sort of penetrate these tunnels that they flood with water. Now, what is interesting about that, now we move up to the present day with the two Legida brothers and the huge sort of resources that they now have at their disposal. It's interesting that early on in the series you get the impression that the older brother is a retired postman and the younger brother has a wine merchant's business in California. But they have far more business interests than was originally talked about. And it's interesting over the series how they're sort of viewed as just amateurs to now they're sort of described as being experts, which through the experience and the number of years you could say that they are experts. Now, of the artifacts that have been brought up, now I want you to run with the idea that this is all true. Suspend any prejudices or beliefs as to whether you think it's totally fake or contrived for television or it is genuine. Just run with the idea that it is genuine, because there's been finds of things that date back to Roman times. I believe even a short sword has been found intact. But how did it get there? Because where does this narrative take us with this television series? It's in a way it's opening up questions about the accepted history. So how far will this be taken? Will there be a great discovery in one of these tunnels? Because the story itself in some ways is far more fascinating than if it was to end up as just a wooden chest with a load of gold coins. That would, to me, be very anticlimactic. There's also a sort of irony. One of the holes on the island is known as the money pit. But the money pit, you could say, is the amount of time and energy. If we take the word, change the word money into true wealth, how much focus and attention do you give to this story? How much time are you prepared to devote to watching the television series, for example, which comes under the bracket of reality television. But from the perspective, if you were in the position of the two brothers and a television company approached you where you would get royalties for appearing on the show, that would be useful money to put into funding the exploration in itself. But a Roman sword, does a Roman sword cease to have any functional value after the end of the collapse of the Roman Empire, for example? Surely in terms with the historical narrative of warfare, that a sword, be it Roman or otherwise, would still be a useful weapon and still could be used as a sword, so it would have a value. But how it ends up being found so deep below the ground, it's so easy to assume that, oh, maybe the Romans went there. Well, if something like a sword has a practical value, it would still be used. Notice also, with all the stories of pirates' treasure, if it involves coins, there's no question of, oh, it's in a completely different currency. It would be the metal content of the actual coins, because you could obviously melt these down. But there's also the question of, we use the Roman sword, at what point does it move beyond its practical application for what it was made for, to when it is then classed as a piece of history, something that is going to be found in a museum and has a different sort of value to it. There's little things like that, and then there's the whole thing with the narrative of it, and how it would imply that it conflicts with the accepted historical narrative, because it opens up the question of how long ago did Europeans go to the Americas. Certainly it would seem to be what we would call the Viking era, and possibly before that as well. This is, of course, only going with the sort of accepted and given narrative about history. But it is a fascinating topic, but is there anything else we can glean from this? Leaving aside of whether it's true or whether it's false or whether there is some truth in it, the most positive aspect, and it is something that in a spin-off story that from the compilation of this television series, consider if you were the elder brother and you've read about this story in Reader's Digest, which this Rick Legida did, and it's become an inspiration. What is the likelihood of going from just reading a story and having such a fascination that it would feel like a purpose for being here, a quest that you would feel so compelled to follow it? So in a way it becomes consuming, because the two brothers, to a greater extent, have dedicated their life and their energy and resources to this mystery of Oak Island. So you've got this overwhelming fascination that becomes a drive, and to go from that position of just reading about a story to the situation you have today, where you have multi-axle heavy drilling equipment which would cost considerable sums of money to hire in. What an inspiration that could be seen as well, if you have the determination and the desire to see something through and see it through to the end. That, I feel, is a huge inspiration, something very positive we can take from this story, regardless of whether you think the thing is actually true or false or not. Remember, the devil is in the detail. We're looking at what is this story evoking in oneself. How am I meant to feel about it, for example? Certainly there is a certain amount of frustration and annoyance if you watch an episode and you really don't learn a lot. You just get repeated information with a little snippet of new things. But taking into account the association with Knights Templar and Masonic symbols and things that have been found carved into the rock, which seem to be clues, how much involvement would those secret societies, if they still exist, have in all of this? Is there knowledge of what is really down there? Is there knowledge even of how to engineer the thing in the first place, how to build these? Given that given from the story that we're talking about sort of 1600s, 1700s and pirate ships, the considerable manpower that it would take to be able to dig down a region of around 100 foot, for example, in which to bury treasure, the whole idea of an intricate system of flood tunnels, so as people try and get near to this alleged treasure, that these tunnels flood. That the engineering side I do personally find as fascinating, and considering the resources and what sort of equipment would have been available to people of, say, 300-400 years ago. But it is a fascinating story, and it's got many perspectives. You've got the perspective of the television company is obviously there to do it as entertainment and will want to keep this story going for as long as possible. So there is a sort of money pit aspect to that. There is also the aspect of the story can be inspiring to many others to, as much as anything else, to weigh up as, whilst it is an inspiration, it can become very consuming of your entire life to that magnitude. There is also the question of how far will this story be taken in regard to what is televised when it is very much seeming to be at odds with the narrative of history. And of course, the question of what artifacts and things may or may not be buried there. It's not exactly hidden because every episode will make reference to Knights Templar, to various other organisations, and as much as anything else. So where is all this actually going to lead is quite interesting. But I thought I'd share a perspective on this, particularly with the idea of the practicality of a sword, be it Roman or later. If you're still in an era where conflicts and warfare would be enacted using swords before the introduction of guns, for example, then there would be the practical use of it. But then at what point does it transition into it's a piece of historic evidence of a past of humanity in general, and then it ends up as on display in a museum, for example? Because certainly the fact that there are many ancient artifacts that are on display in museums, there would seem to suggest from that that after a given time period that there is a historical value to all of these things, leaving aside any agenda and story that may go with the actual artifacts. But the actual artifacts themselves, when they become of great age, of great antiquity, how throughout history they always seems to be a certain amounts that are displayed in museums today. And clearly, in, for example, a sword, how much would that have been used for its intended function before it was sort of retired, shall we say? So a few thoughts here that I'm not saying do watch the series, I'm not saying don't watch the series, I'm just saying, or as much as anything else, I'm using this as an example of what are we supposed to do with this information that is being presented to us. Is there anything positive we can see in it? Is there anything negative that we could learn from it equally? Is there things in it that can help inspire us in our own journeys in life? It doesn't have to be about treasure hunting or trying to solve mysteries. But in a way, if you sort of turn that story inwardly again, like many other things, the digging down, the trying to get to the mystery, when you consider that in an internalized sense in meditation, and where you're trying to get the mystery of resolving who you really are, for example. You're certainly not the thing you see in the mirror. That is just the housing. We're far more than we would appear to be. But I feel these things are worth looking at to a certain degree, just to get an overview on. and what it can teach us about ourselves from it, especially if we take on the role of being the observer of self. So, what enticed us to watch an episode or to follow this story, for example? And of course, to weigh up how much of your time, focus, and energy that is going to take as well. Is it going to be something of benefit to you? This is what it really comes down to. My advice with anything, whatever you look at, is only go in deep enough until you can start to see an emerging pattern, which certainly with something, the broad subject of reality TV is one of the what we would call reality TV. Probably Oak Island is, shall we say, the best, the least trivial than what I glean about a lot of these things like Big Brother and such like. Not sort of things I'm interested in at all, but this to me stands out as something slightly different, and it will be interesting to see where this goes in terms of how long will this story be kept going. If I was one of those two brothers, I would certainly, because they're both around about the age of 70-ish, as far as I know. If you've dedicated a greater part of your life to such a project, would you not want to have the answer resolved within your lifetime, rather than being like many previous explorers who are sort of household names if you follow the whole story? You could say that their place in history has been secured, as with the two brothers and anybody else involved that's a main figure in this exploration. So there is the sort of the personal fame, the notoriety aspect, which is pretty much secured. And certainly with the desire to find the treasure from a financial point of view, with regards to the personal fortunes of the two brothers and the son of the younger brother, Alex, I believe it's sort of in the region, but the combined figure is something in the region of 60 million. So they really, you could say, have the resources to go all out and actually resolve this, which of course would be in conflict with the wishes of a television company who would want to keep this story going. But then is also to consider all the aspects of when it starts moving into the realms of Knights Templar and what other parties may be involved in this, what information that certain parties may not wish the public to have knowledge of is another big question. So I'm not saying I have any answers on this, I'm just giving you a perspective and as much a blueprint pattern to take, not just from this story, to apply it to anything else that is external of you, and to weigh up and analyse how that may benefit you or how it may cost you time. That, after all, is your true wealth. It is finite. It's how you spend your time, is the saying. I feel that's all I wish to say on the subject. You can just type in Oak Island on YouTube and I'm pretty certain you will get a whole host of videos. It's interesting that this topic actually sort of landed in my lap on the homepage on YouTube, and it's like, why would that come up? But I feel there was something in it that, which I've just discussed in this video, that I wanted to talk about, to use as a blueprint. So whether it is to mislead from the system. That's why it's landed on the home screen. Maybe it's to entice me to get my focus there, but that's a closed chapter, so I probably will not make another video, a follow-up video on this topic. As a final note, the title that I'm giving to this video, it'll be interesting to see how that may or may not affect viewing figures as well. But it's over to you. Let me know in the comments your thoughts, if you have any ideas on this and in the wider context of what are we supposed to do with this information. So I'll leave that one over to you and look forward to hearing from you in the comments. Links are in the description if you wish to get in contact, if you need help in any way. And as always, until the next video, unconditional love to you all.